A stunning investigation has uncovered what could be the smoking gun in Texas's gerrymandering scandal. Contradictory sworn testimony that may expose a Republican state senator to perjury charges while revealing a coordinated scheme between Greg Abbott and the Trump DOJ to manipulate redistricting maps. The evidence suggests someone is lying under oath, and the legal consequences could reshape Texas politics and trigger a constitutional crisis. Texas Governor Greg Abbott recently called a special legislative session to redraw the state's congressional maps, claiming his hands were forced by a Department of Justice letter stating that 4 districts were illegally drawn using racial considerations. Abbott presented this as federal mandate rather than political choice, using the DOJ demand as cover for further gerrymandering. But investigative reporting has uncovered a fundamental contradiction that could expose the entire scheme. The same state senator responsible for drawing the original maps had previously testified under oath that race was never considered in the redistricting process. Now the DOJ and Abbott are claiming race was the primary factor requiring the maps to be redrawn. Someone is lying, and the legal implications could be devastating. Democracy Docket reporters discovered the contradiction by comparing Abbott's justification for the special session with trial transcripts from ongoing redistricting litigation. The state senator responsible for drawing the maps made multiple clear statements under oath that race was not a factor in creating the district boundaries. As one expert explained, she said several times, "I drew the maps blind to race. You cannot get any clearer than that. There's no wiggle room there." This sworn testimony directly contradicts the DOJ letter that Abbott relied on to justify the special session. The letter from Trump administration officials, including Harmeet Dillon and Pam Bondi, explicitly stated that the maps needed to be redrawn because race was used to draw at least 4 districts. The 4 districts identified by the DOJ are all currently held by Democrats, a detail that raises questions about the political motivations behind both the original redistricting and the current demand for changes. The legal contradictions create an impossible situation for Texas Republicans. For years, the state has been defending its congressional map against lawsuits alleging racial discrimination. The entire defense strategy rested on the claim that race played no role in drawing district boundaries. A different set of plaintiffs has now filed an emergency motion to reopen testimony in the redistricting case, seeking to depose the state senator whose previous statements are now contradicted by the DOJ's findings. The court has ordered Texas to respond by the end of today, suggesting judicial urgency to resolve these contradictions. The potential consequences extend far beyond one state senator. As legal experts note, this scandal implicates everyone who filed briefs claiming the maps were race-blind, including officials in the Texas Attorney General's office who repeatedly told federal judges there was no use of race in redistricting. The contradiction raises 3 possibilities, none of them good for Texas Republicans. Either the state senator committed perjury by falsely testifying that race wasn't used, or Abbott and the DOJ are lying about race being a factor in the current maps, or there was a coordinated scheme to manufacture a pretext for further gerrymandering. This scandal could trigger a constitutional crisis if evidence emerges that the Department of Justice purposely sent a false letter to justify political gerrymandering. Using federal law enforcement to manufacture pretexts for partisan redistricting would represent an unprecedented abuse of DOJ authority. The timing of Abbott's special session call in the middle of devastating floods that have killed people in Texas suggests political calculation rather than legal necessity. Abbott wanted the cover of claiming his hands were forced by federal mandate rather than admitting to voluntary gerrymandering. But the legal exposure extends beyond political embarrassment. Federal judges don't appreciate being misled during trials, and the discovery that central testimony may have been false could result in sanctions, reopened proceedings, and potential criminal referrals for perjury. The broader redistricting implications are equally significant. If the current maps were drawn using race-conscious considerations, as the DOJ now claims, they may be unconstitutional and subject to complete invalidation. This could force genuine neutral redistricting rather than the further gerrymandering Abbott seeks. The Texas scandal has prompted discussions about Democratic responses to Republican gerrymandering. California Governor Gavin Newsom has suggested that his state might abandon its independent redistricting commission if Republicans continue extreme gerrymandering in states like Texas. This represents a potential shift in Democratic strategy. While Democratic-controlled states like California, New Jersey, and New York have adopted independent or bipartisan redistricting processes, Republican states have pursued increasingly aggressive partisan gerrymandering. This asymmetry creates a fundamental imbalance in American democracy. Democratic states voluntarily limit their redistricting power through good governance reforms, while Republican states maximize partisan advantage through extreme gerrymandering. Newsom's threat to respond in kind recognizes that unilateral disarmament in redistricting fights may be unsustainable for Democratic competition. If Texas Republicans can steal 4 Democratic seats through manipulated redistricting, Democratic states might need to respond by flipping 10 Republican seats to maintain electoral balance. The Texas gerrymandering scandal exposes the intersection of legal manipulation, political corruption, and constitutional crisis in modern American democracy. Whether through perjured testimony or coordinated federal interference, the scheme reveals how far some officials will go to maintain political power through electoral manipulation. The legal consequences for individual Republicans may include perjury charges, sanctions, and career destruction. But the systemic consequences for American democracy are even more serious. When political parties can manipulate federal law enforcement to justify extreme gerrymandering, the basic principle of fair elections becomes meaningless. The court's demand for immediate responses suggests judicial recognition that this scandal threatens the integrity of ongoing litigation and the redistricting process itself. Federal judges have limited tolerance for being misled about central facts in constitutional cases. For voters, this scandal demonstrates how gerrymandering schemes operate through legal manipulation rather than transparent political process. Politicians claim federal mandates force their hands, while actually coordinating with federal officials to manufacture those mandates. The broader lesson concerns the sustainability of democratic norms when one party abandons them while the other maintains them. Democratic states that voluntarily adopt fair redistricting while Republican states pursue extreme gerrymandering creates an unsustainable imbalance that threatens competitive elections. The resolution of this scandal will determine whether American redistricting operates through legal process or political manipulation, whether sworn testimony in federal court matters, and whether states can coordinate with federal officials to circumvent constitutional protections for voting rights. The stakes extend beyond Texas to the fundamental question of whether American democracy can survive when basic electoral fairness becomes optional rather than required. This scandal could determine whether gerrymandering operates through legal process or political manipulation in America. What do you think? Should Democratic states abandon fair redistricting if Republican states continue extreme gerrymandering? Or is there a better way to protect electoral fairness? Share your thoughts on whether unilateral disarmament in redistricting fights can survive in current political environment. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay informed about the legal battles that will determine whether American elections remain competitive. Your engagement helps us continue covering the redistricting fights that shape the future of democratic representation.